Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wild Card Round Highlight Haven NFL Recap Show. I'm your host, Matthew Heiserman, and today we are joined by Josh Wolver of Josh's Sports Report to break down each and every game that took place during Wild Card Weekend. Josh, it's great to have you on.
Thanks for having me on, Matt. The playoffs are officially underway. There were a couple blowouts, a
Mhm.
couple interesting ones. Can't wait to get into this recap.
Yeah, a lot of great games that we do have to break down this week. As always, we will be accepting callers throughout the stream. We will be
Yep.
monitoring the chat if you have any questions. But let's jump right into it, starting with Chargers at Texans. A really shocking surprise, if you ask me. This was a Texans blowout, 32-12 victory. I'll let you get it started here.
Yeah, Texans blowout, but Texans blowout win. And I heading into this game wouldn't have been surprised if this scoreboard was flipped around the other way. CJ Stroud close to 300 yards passing and a touchdown. Joe Mixon, what a season he's had. 106 yards and a touchdown on 25 carries. How about Nico Collins, man?
Mhm.
7 receptions, 122 yards and a touchdown. But then Lad McConkey outdoes him, 197 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown. But that doesn't really matter because the Chargers got blown out of the water. I mean, this game, Chargers took a 6-0 lead after the first quarter. Houston had a nice little run there, and I think in the final 2 minutes of the first half, they scored 10 points, and that just got their momentum rolling. And then from there, they really dominated the second half. Uh, Houston coming out with a 32-point win in the playoffs after the way they finished their season specifically is what's shocking me the most because they had all the negative momentum in the world on their side,
Mhm.
and then they come out here and beat a good LA team that was they were giving up 17 points a game. We talked about it in the pregame show, and then Houston is going to put up 32 on them. Extremely impressive. I liked what I saw. Um, there's still a lot to go for this Houston team, but this is a good start.
Yeah, I mean, the story of the game, in my opinion, was obviously Justin Herbert. It was a terrible performance from Justin Herbert. He went 14 of 32, 242 passing yards, a passing touchdown, and 4 interceptions. Herbert threw more interceptions in this one game than he did all season long. One of his interceptions was a pick six, and he finished with a 40.9 passer rating, which is
Yeah.
absolutely terrible. And you mentioned he was able to get McConkey involved. He did get him on an 86-yard touchdown in the fourth quarter. That was obviously a massive play, but it wasn't enough. As you mentioned, the Texans offense hasn't been great recently. CJ Stroud obviously had an off year, but here's the thing. He can win. He's played in 2 seasons and he has 2 playoff wins. That's impressive for a quarterback in their second year who was drafted to a team who was thought to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. To have 2 playoff wins in 2 years, that is really good for him. Obviously, as you mentioned, Joe Mixon, Nico Collins were amazing in this one. Derek Stingley also had 2 interceptions. Felt like no team really wanted to keep possession of the ball in this one. There were 16 combined punts, fumbles, and interceptions throughout the entire game. Overall, a really sloppy game, but I think Texans defense really stepped up, and that's what ended up deciding it. Now,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
talk about ended up deciding it. I agree with the first point
Mhm.
made there that 4 interceptions thrown. That's going to do it in a playoff game.
Yeah, now moving over to our next game, Steelers at Ravens. This was another blowout, and we actually have a solid amount of blowouts, as you mentioned in this first round. Hopefully, things get a little closer in the divisional round. This one
Yeah,
was a 28-14 Ravens victory, and Baltimore just dominated throughout the entire game. They entered halftime up 21 to nothing. Russell Wilson didn't have a terrible game, 20 of 29, 270 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. It just wasn't enough. Baltimore's defense was amazing in this one. Their run defense kept Pittsburgh to just 29 total rushing yards. That is absolutely
yeah,
unbelievable. And then on the other side, you have Derrick Henry, who probably had the best game that we've seen from him all season long. 26 carries, 186 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 7.2 yards per attempt. That's kind of what we saw out of Ashton Jeanty in college football. So to see that against an NFL level defense is just unbelievable on his end. good game from George Pickens, but Lamar Jackson and Rashad Bateman really shined in this one. Jackson, 16 of 21, 175 passing yards, 81 rushing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. And then Bateman, 2 receptions, 24 yards, and a touchdown. I know that's not great, but Bateman in general has had 5 receiving touchdowns throughout his last 5 games. He's been on fire, and this is a great time to be hot, obviously, in the playoffs. And then Baltimore had the ball for over 65% of the game and went 10 of 15 on third down. Those two stats are kind of stats that go under the radar that can really decide the outcome of games. If they hold on to the ball, they control the tempo, then it is going to go well for them. And then obviously converting on third down when it matters the most, not giving away the ball. Just a really good game from Baltimore all around.
Yeah, Matt, you hit on all the key points. Everywhere I'm gonna go is gonna sound like a bit of a broken record, but I think you summed this game up perfectly. I'm looking at total plays here, 72
Yeah,
to 45
yeah,
in
that's
favor of
insane.
Baltimore. Mind-boggling. When you go up and look at the stats, and especially when you look at the Ravens' running statistics,
Mhm.
it sums up the season, right? If the Ravens are going to win, this is how they're going to do it. They're going to
Yeah,
have 26 carries for Derrick Henry, 186 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7.2 yards a carry. You mentioned it. And they're going to have Lamar Jackson carry the ball 15 times for 81 yards, 5.4. Like a couple of those are quarterback scrambles, but the Ravens will beat you with the run game. And that gets to my second point is this feels like an old time classic rivalry situation. Run the ball, AFC North, cold weather teams, run it down the other team's throat. And in this game, Matt, the Ravens had 299 rushing yards, and the Steelers had 29. 299 to 29. Is that not ridiculous? Najee Harris, 6 carries for 17 yards. I mean, they had nothing working. You mentioned how great Baltimore's defense played. I think that was a big key as well for me to talk about. Overall, that was team defense. They were
yeah.
shutting the Steelers
Mhm.
down. They played well. They got off the field third and fourth down. They kind of put Mike Tomlin in a situational blunder where you want to be risky enough, but when he was being risky and towards the end of the game when he had to be risky, his team wasn't paying it off for him. So they win by 2 touchdowns. It felt like it was even more of a blowout than that, honestly, to me.
Yeah.
Ravens move on. That was a good football team, the Ravens coming in on a hot schedule. Meanwhile, Pittsburgh is going to end their season with yet another loss. That means their last win was way back when against the Browns on December 8th. That's how
Yeah.
they're going to end their season with a salty taste in their mouth.
And then we have a returning viewer in the chat, Timothy Park, who says, Matthew, as a Commanders fan, how did it make you feel seeing that
Mm.
field goal made? We will be getting into this game a little later, so stay tuned for that. I'm not going to talk about this right now. We do have, I believe, 2 games until that Commanders game, but we will be recapping that game soon. Now, the Ravens, 5 game winning streak. They are going to be playing Buffalo in their next game. That should be an amazing matchup. Buffalo, obviously, 31-7 blowout victory. Let's get all the blowouts, out of the way to
Yeah.
start the episode. This one was just an ugly performance all around. Not really ever too close of a matchup. This was the Broncos' first playoff game since their Super Bowl winning season in 2015. Bo Nix, not a terrible game. 144 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown, 13 of 22. But he definitely didn't look as good in this game as he did throughout the regular season. Obviously, makes sense for a rookie quarterback who wasn't necessarily supposed to be in this situation. That is a lot of pressure for him. And then Troy Franklin was his leading receiver, 2 receptions, or Cortland Sutton was his leading receiver, 5 receptions, 75 receiving yards. And then Troy Franklin had 2 receptions, 54 receiving yards, and a touchdown. But Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills offense was just absolutely incredible this game. 20 of 26 for Allen, 272 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. James Cook also had 120 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. And then Curtis Samuel, 3 receptions, 68 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Kind of a, under the radar player. I guess you wouldn't expect Curtis Samuel, especially in the playoffs, to go off like this, but he was a massive target for Allen in this game. And then Buffalo had 131 more rushing yards than Denver. Rushing yards has been a story throughout the first 3 games that we've previewed. This one, rushing yards decided the victory. Last game, obviously, rushing yards decided the victory. So, yeah, that 131 more rushing yards than Denver did make a massive, massive difference. The Bills had the ball for over 41 minutes of the game. Broncos went just 2 of 9 on third down, and the Bills have made the divisional round now in 5 straight postseasons. In terms of Denver, they weren't going to make the Super Bowl obviously this season. No one expected that, but it definitely sucks to see a young team like this go out on, a 24-point loss.
Matt, I'm gonna beg to differ with a couple of your points here.
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
at the beginning you would be surprised at how close Denver kept this thing.
Yeah.
They headed into the
Mhm.
half down 3 points. Score was 10-3 Buffalo. I thought Denver, their ability to stick in there with the Bills is what honestly I saw at the beginning, but then Buffalo just proved their experience, how much of a better team they are, why they have an MVP candidate on their team, and 10 other things. The reasons why basically the entire league saw Denver losing this game. But you said not a terrible game for Bo Nix. You were talking about 13 of 22, 144 yards and a touchdown. But you got to remember, 43 of those yards and the touchdown
Mhm.
came on one big play at the beginning of the game. And before that, to set that up, I mean that drive was basically just two big throws. So if you're factoring out that drive, the rest of the game, Bo Nix has less than 100 yards passing and no touchdowns, and has a completion percentage below 500. So obviously, what can you expect from a rookie in his opening playoff performance? This was not the Bo Nix we saw in the regular season. We saw a big contender for the Offensive Rookie of the Year candidate. I'm sure you've got a word or two to say about that subject. But uh, I mean, how could you blame the guy? It's kind of his first postseason as a 7 seed. They just snuck
Mhm.
in because they beat Carson Wentz in the whatever practice squad of the Chiefs, and then the Buffalo Bills are the 2 seed, and they're a 14-win regular season team. Thanks so much for the chat, Timothy. We'll get there in just a second. Thanks so much for your support. We will get to that Commander game in a second. So I definitely saw the inexperience of this Broncos team play out, but I also saw the experience of this Buffalo Bills team play out because Josh Allen goes 20 of 26. What else do you expect? 2 touchdowns, no interception, which was the key all season to limit the turnovers. James Cook, a workhorse, 23 carries, 120 yards, and a touchdown. Overall, great games for the Bills. They didn't shock anybody, but they proved what they can do.
And I think part of what I said when I was saying, like, this was an ugly game, even when Denver did keep it close, they still weren't playing great.
Yeah,
As you said, a
agree.
lot of it came off that one drive. Um, but in general, going into halftime 10-10 is not great, and I think overall they benefited off Buffalo also having a really bad half, and then obviously things
Hmm.
took a bad turn in the second half that caused this terrible blowout. Now
Yeah.
moving over to, the next game, we have Packers at Eagles, finally over to the NFC. Eagles 22-10 victory. Josh, what did you see in this one?
Yeah, well, what I saw was Jordan Love crumbling under pressure. This is the exact opposite of what we saw last year when the Packers went to Dallas as a 7 seed and upset the number 2 seed Cowboys. And what Jordan Love had 4 or 5 passing touchdowns. This year, he's not going to throw for one, and he's going to have 3 interceptions. And
Yeah.
for me, all this started on the first play of the game. It's a kickoff, and the
Mhm.
opening kickoff return, huge hit, fumble, ball's free. Philadelphia picks it up, and they're at like the 30-yard line. The game start. We're 3 seconds into the game, right? That's where I knew it was all going to go south for Green Bay. Because Matt, on the pregame show, our biggest key for the Packers is start strong, get ahead of the Eagles, and make them play catch up. And you know what they did? They get the opening kickoff.
Mhm.
They receive the ball and they fumble it in the blink of an eye. And guess what? Philadelphia takes that prominent starting field position and quickly turns it into a touchdown. 2 minutes into the game, the Eagles are up 7. That's exactly what the Packers had to avoid. That wasn't even a Jordan Love mistake. He adds 3 more of those on the day, including the game sealing interception. Um, he made some bad decisions. He made some
Mhm. Yeah.
extremely bad decisions. Josh Jacobs, I mean, the touchdown and the 81 yards can't do it all by himself. For the Eagles, another massive game for Saquon Barkley, 25 carries, 119 yards. And just a side anecdote to add here, end of the game, Barkley's in the open field. He can add 50, 60 more yards and a touchdown if he wants to, but he does the right thing and takes a seat so that the team can kneel it out and, don't let the Packers get the ball back. Don't give them hope. So he did the team thing. He obviously could have stat padded one for 200 yards and a touchdown, but he didn't need to. He did the right thing. Jalen Hurts, 131 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now this is, it's mistake-free football. He has a good supporting cast around him, so he doesn't need to do too much. And the key for Philadelphia has always been to keep on running the ball. That was the problem with this Eagles team and Nick Sirianni at the beginning of the year. They knew they had a good run game, yet when the stages were bright, when the lights were bright, they wouldn't run the ball, right? And that makes no sense. And they've clearly figured things out with a 22-10 win. Matt, I've been talking for a while. I'll kick it over to you for your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, you hit all the boxes really, and I think that was really just as you mentioned, a terrible way to start the game. Lost all momentum immediately, and as you mentioned, it did result in a touchdown. So just not the way you want to start when you're trying to get off to an early lead, obviously. And then Jordan Love, extremely inconsistent, 3 interceptions. Not the same Jordan Love we saw last year, as you mentioned. Not the same Jordan Love we saw earlier this season. He looked amazing when he came back from injury. Not really sure where this Jordan Love came from, but it's definitely not what any Packers fan or anyone in the Packers organization wants to see. Josh Jacobs did have a good game, but Jalen Hurts, he had 13 completions, 131 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. You said it. He plays in sort of a system. He relies on the people around him as well. And I think that ties into the fact that Jalen Hurts during the regular season was 21st in completions by any quarterback. That is extremely low for someone who's considered to be one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, 21st in completions. Um,
Matt, I think that narrative started to take a turn now that you see what's happening when Saquon Barkley gets inserted into this offense.
yeah, but I mean, they don't rely on Jalen Hurts. That's the thing. They don't rely on Jalen Hurts. I'm not
Mhm.
saying he's a bad quarterback, but they don't need. He's not the determining factor. What we saw in Kirk Cousins and the Falcons, Kirk Cousins is the determining factor of this game. If he has a bad game, it's over. And if Jalen Hurts has a bad game, which by the way, I'm not calling this a bad game, but if he does have a bad game, then the Eagles are still just fine with Saquon Barkley in the run game. Jahan Dotson got his first career receiving touchdown as an Eagle as well. Green Bay had 8 penalties for 85 yards. This game was a little bit closer, but it still felt like a blowout, in my opinion. It still felt, I don't know about a blowout, but Philadelphia had control of the game throughout the entire contest.
Matt, I'll tell you why it felt like a blowout because Green Bay was blowing every opportunity they had,
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah.
even though the scoreboard, a 12-point game, isn't going to reflect like whatever we saw in the Chargers and Texans game, the reason is because whenever Green Bay got the ball, you were like, well, all right, well, their defense is back out there now. So, time to see if, I mean, it was basically like they needed some sort of defensive miracle to get them back in this game because the offense, it really wasn't coming out, and it reflects that with 10 points in a 4-quarter game.
Now moving over to my Washington Commanders against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really, really close victory, 23-20. Too close for comfort, and I'm not going to lie, I didn't expect us to win this game, as I said during the tailgate show. So this was a nice, pleasant surprise for me. But getting into this game, first of all, Deron Payne did leave with a finger injury. Zane Gonzalez hit a game-winning field goal that obviously doinked off the post. Now, getting back into this comment, nerve-wracking. Nerve-wracking is the answer. It kind of happened so quickly where it's like I couldn't fully comprehend the doink as it was happening. But yeah, it was definitely nerve-wracking, and just knowing the Commanders' kicking history this season made it a lot worse. The fact that Zane Gonzalez is like our 5th kicker that we've had to use this season. I mean, we're talking Cade York, Brandon McManus, Austin Seibert. It's been an ugly kicking rotation for the Commanders this season, so that was definitely not the ideal situation to end the game. And that's usually a chip shot, But with the Commanders, it's obviously not. You really do need luck for that kind of kick to go in. And then this was Washington's first playoff win in 19 years, or 6,945 days. It has been a while since the last Commanders or Redskins, I should say, playoff
Yeah.
victory. Jaden Daniels, my goodness, he is insane. 23 of 35, 268 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. Look at whatever statistics you want. The poise that he had in the fourth quarter is unbelievable. Any other quarterback in the league would be extremely nervous, more than extremely nervous. It didn't look like he was phased one single bit. He obviously had blood dripping down his face earlier in the game. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He went out there, he took care of business. It was an amazing, amazing game from Jaden Daniels. And then Terry McLaurin and Diame Brown were his main targets. I want to get into Brown soon. McLaurin had 7 receptions, 89 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I think I was kind of doubting McLaurin earlier this season due to his inconsistency. Like he would have 80 receiving yards one game and then 25 the next, 125, maybe back down to 15 the game after that. What we've seen from him recently is really, really promising in terms of he can be the number one receiver, in my opinion, on a contending team, obviously coming off the career year that he has had. And then Diame Brown, he had 5 receptions, 89 receiving yards, and a touchdown. What's funny is obviously Brown hasn't really done anything in his first 4 years as a Commander. And this is the final year of his contract. I was really high on Brown when he was drafted. That was back when we had Sam Howell. Well, he wasn't drafted with Sam Howell, but Howell came in during like his second year or something. They had that UNC connection. They both played at North Carolina, and I was expecting big things for Brown that season. Turns out Howell just wasn't the best option, and Brown didn't really do anything that year. So to see him have a great game was amazing. And this is the final year of his contract, so that would be massive if this is the game that potentially earns him that contract over the offseason now that he is a free agent. And then Baker Mayfield, 15 of 18, 185 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and an extremely costly fumble. That's what he's going to be remembered for this game. The fumble towards the end of the game that kind of lost Tampa Bay the entire matchup. Bucky Irving, 17 carries, 77 rushing yards. Not great, not terrible, but it didn't feel like he was ever having that in the game. This was a really, really solid performance from Washington's defensive linemen. I really liked what we saw from them in this game. We saw some guys like Dorrance Armstrong really get involved. Not all about the Deron Paynes, Jonathan Allens, but I think this team is kind of building a good depth-filled defensive line. And then obviously the linebackers, we don't have to get into them now. Bobby Wagner, what a game he had. And then Frankie Louvu, not crazy active in this one, but still a solid game from him. And then Marshawn Lattimore.
Grab your popcorn.
Yeah, this is not the part that I want to talk about right now. I've talked really well about this team. This is not the part I want to talk about. Evans had 7 receptions, 92 receiving yards, and a touchdown. My goodness. And I was texting in our group chat privately saying that Marshawn Lattimore was going to get cooked in this game. And that is exactly what happened.
Yeah, right.
1,000,000% got cooked on basically every single play. It's not easy to guard a 6'5" first ballot Hall of Famer, but it felt like Evans was just destroying Lattimore out there. It looked like Lattimore was the old Wash guy, even though I'm pretty sure he's younger than Evans. Actually, I'm not pretty sure. I almost guarantee that he is younger than Evans. And then obviously Lattimore had that terrible pass interference call in the end zone that resulted in a Mike Evans touchdown. Lattimore might have been dealing with a hamstring injury. I'm not 100% sure, what that situation
they had
was
him
like.
listed as it.
Yeah, but I mean, either way, he looked like the worst defensive player out there for a majority of snaps for the Commanders. That's just not what you want to see out of a guy who you really committed on over the trade deadline. Obviously, we gave some assets to him. And at this point, why would we? It just looks dumb right now. Why wouldn't we have just put Sanistril on Mike Evans? Obviously, size is a big problem, but if you're going to have a slightly bigger corner in Marshawn Lattimore and it doesn't even matter, then what's the point? But no, just a terrible game from him. Another note that I had, Dan Quinn was extremely aggressive. Washington went 3 of
Yep.
5 on fourth down. Um, they failed both of their failed conversions were in the red zone, so that did suck. And I know I was really upset when we weren't taking the points, especially early in the game when we were down like 3-0. No reason to risk it at that point, especially considering that we received the ball after halftime. So I'm not loving how aggressive Dan Quinn was, but then I could also definitely say that that was part of the reason why we did end up winning the game. Overall, the offensive line wasn't terrible, definitely wasn't great. It was a really rough game for Brandon Coleman. Felt like he was getting beat on almost every single play. And it felt like Washington's run game couldn't do a thing. Brian Robinson had 10 carries. Brian Robinson Jr. had 10 carries, 16 yards. Every time Washington handed the ball off in the second half, it felt like a wasted possession. It felt like, okay, that's a down, gone. Just move to second down, move to third down, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're getting a max of 1 yard on this play.
Yeah, Tampa
That was
was
terrible.
flying to the ball.
Yeah, but overall, I've talked a lot. Those are, some of my main takeaways from this game. Josh, you have anything else to add?
Yeah, Matt, that's going to be a tough act to follow. You've hit on
Yeah.
all the main points. Jaden Daniels, I completely agree. Not only showed the type of NFL player he is, but the type of guy he is on the inside, being able to handle the pressure and compete at a high level in your first playoff game. I mean, Jaden Daniels has done so much this season that when you look at it, if you didn't watch the NFL, and someone told you like, oh wow, that guy's a rookie, you'd be like, what? He is? I mean, looks like he's a seasoned veteran out there. So yeah, Jaden Daniels does a great job there. Um, I think you hit on all my main points. I agree. I'm shocked that Washington was able to pull this out. You mentioned both failed fourth down conversions in or near the red zone. And after that first one, like what, first quarter, I think it was Washington's first possession of the game. They're at about the 20 something yard line, and they go for it on fourth and short, and they don't get it. And then the Tampa Bay goes down there and scores 3. And if they had cashed in 7 there, I think this game takes a huge turn. So that was big for Washington's defense to hold them to 3 there. But I thought after that they would lose their aggression. They end up going for it 4 more times on fourth down, and then go 3 of 4 following that. Washington wins the time of possession game, the total plays, and the penalty yardage game. And they didn't punt this game. I mean, I don't know if you picked up on
Yeah.
that. The emotions were probably riding high. They did not turn the ball over, and they didn't punt. So, and they scored 23 points and got the win there. Going back to that chat about what was it like when the ball was in the air, I actually asked you right before we hit the live button,
Yes, you did.
while we were waiting to start off this live stream, and I was like, man, if that were the Jets and that was how our playoff destiny, I'm not going to say it because the Jets never make the playoffs, so tough
Oh, dude,
scenario to
right there,
imagine.
you just jinxed the Jets for another 10 years.
Okay, I'll reverse jinx. I'll reverse jinx them. The Jets. Wait, how did reverse jinx? That would mean okay. So the Jets suck. They're
What?
so bad.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So I can't really imagine that. But yeah, that must have been extremely stressful. But
Mhm.
you got all the main points in this game because you were a lot more attentive to it than I was. But nice win for the Commanders there, and I'm sure that made your weekend 25 times better.
Yeah, and then obviously Jets just a terrible, terrible, terrible franchise. That's probably not going to make the playoffs for the next 10 years.
Oh, I'd
We'll see.
agree. I think
Yeah. Uh-huh.
I think they're worse than all the UFL teams as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah. Now, Commanders have their hands full this Saturday against the Lions. Yes, we do. We will be previewing that game probably during our tailgate show, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. But yeah, that's obviously going to be a really, really tough game. My upset for division weekend is Rams over Eagles. I would absolutely love that. Obviously, as a Commanders fan, get the Eagles out of here. That's basically our main wish. Just get rid of the Eagles. At least if we lose, if the Eagles are gone too, makes it much better. Um,
Commanders Rams in the NFC Championship game. Could you ever
that
imagine?
would be wild if you told someone at the start of the season.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
do you think Chris Rodriguez should be active this Saturday, considering how poorly we are running the ball outside of Daniels? That's a good question. Probably not. Probably not because I mean, when you look at it, I don't think it's necessarily the player, Robinson himself, that was struggling to run. I think a lot of it was the offensive line, and then Tampa Bay has a allowed the fourth fewest rushing yards of any team this season. So that obviously didn't pair well with Washington's slightly banged up offensive line that just wasn't playing 100%. And then Detroit next week, Detroit has allowed the fifth fewest rushing yards per game of any team, so that's not going to be that much easier of a matchup. But no, I think we kind of just see how things go next week. I don't think we should rush to do anything too crazy in potentially activating Chris Rodriguez Jr. And then Lattimore hasn't played much recently. I will give him the pass, but yeah, but you still have expectations for him. He has not been playing recently because he's obviously been dealing with that hamstring injury. Then, when he comes back, you'd expect that he's fully healthy from that hamstring injury and you'd expect him to be playing at a high level. That's why players practice every single day of the week to get back at that high level if they haven't been playing. So, yeah, he hasn't been playing, but I don't think that's necessarily an excuse for his bad game. Coleman is not playing 100%. He's banged up. That is true. And then that's how we will beat the Lions, winning the time of possession battle. We will definitely see on Saturday. Not going to be an easy matchup, but definitely one I'm looking forward to. Now, moving over to the final game of Wild Card Weekend. Technically not Wild Card Weekend, Wild Card Monday. Um, but we have Vikings at Rams, and what a surprising outcome this one was. Rams 27-9 victory. While Los Angeles did have or didn't have home field advantage, obviously, again, thoughts and prayers go out to everyone in Los Angeles right now. They were
Yep.
playing in Arizona, as I mentioned during the tailgate show. It didn't matter. It didn't matter. They still took care of business. Sam Darnold, not a great game, 25 of 40, 245 passing yards, a touchdown and an interception. TJ Hawkinson was his main target, 5 receptions, 64 receiving yards, and a touchdown. Stafford looked really good out there. Stafford is a veteran that you can trust. He has been struggling recently during the regular season, but when it comes to playoff time, you can always rely on Matthew Stafford, especially against a guy like Sam Darnold, who this is really his first good season in the NFL. That matchup, I know Darnold has been better than Stafford this season, but I'd say that matchup I'd still give to Stafford 9 times out of 10. He went 19 of 27, 209 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns. And then Kyron Williams, 76 rushing yards and a receiving touchdown. Jared Verse obviously had that 57-yard fumble recovery return for a touchdown. This game wasn't perfect for the Rams by any means. They went just 2 of 10 on third down and had 10 penalties for 95 yards, but it was enough to get the job done, moving over to the divisional round against the Eagles.
Yeah, it's not enough. They didn't play perfect, but I mean, they only upset. I mean, it's technically not an upset 4 versus 5, but when you look at the records in the regular season, they had 3 less wins than Minnesota. And the Rams don't play a perfect game, but the Vikings play their worst game of the season. You thought it was bad in Detroit? It's worse in Arizona. Or I mean, technically Los Angeles home field.
Yeah.
But in Arizona,
Yeah.
these fools allowed 9 sacks. 9 sacks. I mean, Sam Darnold was holding the ball out there like it was flag football. Like there was no pass rush. Like it was the Pro Bowl and it was two-hand touch out there. I mean, that dude, I think he might have just lost himself a 5-year, $200 million contract just by playing like this. Just in this one game alone, he might have ruined his future. I'm not sure they re-sign him after this. It was bad. It was bad. They go 1 for 4 on fourth down. I mean, he sits back there so much. They have a fumble recovery, 57-yard scoop and score from Jared Verse. 9 sacks, same amount of sacks as points. That's pretty embarrassing. Doesn't really get more embarrassing than that. And at halftime, you knew this game was over, Matt. You knew this thing was over. Los Angeles dropped a 24-piece in that first half. Vikings had a 1 field goal. It was 24-3. at the halftime break, and it did not get any better for Minnesota. It really didn't. That was bad. That was really bad. I mean, that's the only way I can describe this game is how bad Minnesota played. 27-9. They get I mean, they get made a fool of. This was a mockery for Minnesota. I could go on a 45-minute rant about how bad the Vikings played in this game. But I won't. Um, I'll spare you guys listening in the chat. But you just got to understand how do you, I don't even know how you take 9 sacks. You just set up like a screen pass or something at that point when they're getting that much pressure and when your offensive line is playing that poorly. The Rams, you mentioned it, they didn't even play that well. 2 of 10 on third downs, but I mean they played well enough to score 27 points. It was mainly the defense. They kept here's what it is. They kept Justin Jefferson under 60 yards. They kept Jordan Addison under 30 yards. They kept TJ Hawkinson in check with less than 65 yards. So all three of those are their three biggest playmakers, and they kept Aaron Jones below 50 yards. Those are four of their biggest playmakers, and they all don't even combine for 200 total yards. It was bad for Minnesota, but I'm going to stop going on this rant now. Vikings lose, they get crushed, and they make a fool of themselves, honestly.
Yeah, O-line for Minnesota was terrible, but some of the sacks were on Darnold. Definitely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely true right there. Now I do want to make one more point. What do you want to do when you play the Rams? When you play the Rams, you want to stop Puka Nacua and you want to stop Cooper Kupp. Obviously their two best wide receivers and just a really, really good wide receiver duo. And the Vikings did that. The Vikings were amazing at that. They kept Cooper Kupp to 29 receiving yards, Nacua to 44. And how do they not capitalize? That is terrible that you allow Tyler Higbee to have the most receiving yards with 54 and you still lose by 18. That is absolutely terrible. Josh, I'll let you take this one. How do you think the Eagles will do during the rest of the playoffs?
Yeah, so wow, okay, big topic swing here. Appreciate the comment, Sideline Whisperers. Appreciate everyone's activity in the chat today. This is the most chats we've gotten in the entire history of this thing. We do appreciate it. We have time for maybe one caller if you want to hop on the line really quick. We might be able to sneak you in here before the end of this episode. So Sideline Whispers, how do you think Eagles will do the rest of the playoffs? That's a tough one. See, they certainly didn't play their best game. Jordan Love played a heck of a lot worse than anyone expected, which is why they didn't play that well. Jalen Hurts, I think, did a nice job of sitting back and not doing too much. So I think there was good things to see there. But then they play the Rams this weekend, and we'll get into this more in depth if you want to tune into our tailgate show. We'll be talking all about it there. I think that the way you beat the Rams is that both of these teams have a stronger running attack. But obviously, I just think the key is utilizing Saquon Barkley because he is, he was, if he plays that final regular season game, excuse me, he's borderline breaking the all-time rushing record. And so when you have a player that good, you just feed him the ball. In this week against Green Bay, they have 25 carries for 120 yards. I mentioned earlier in the episode, probably could have been more like 26 carries, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns if he doesn't slide down a little early there at the end of that game, and also makes the win look a little bit better for Philadelphia. So I think they played well. The Packers played a heck of a lot worse this weekend. So I think the Eagles did enough, but I think they have the opportunity, honestly, Matt. I think Los Angeles played extremely well against many are calling now fraudulent Vikings team. I think the Eagles really do have a chance to blow them out, but I also think they have the opportunity to lose by 10 plus. I think this Eagles team could go either way with this next game. What about you?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I'd probably have to go Philadelphia just in the simple terms of use Saquon Barkley, and I don't think anyone can stop him. Like you just said, he's been the story of their offense. And even if he's not having a great game, they can still rely on the receiving game with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And we're talking about one of the best defenses in the NFL. So right now, I'd probably give the edge to Philadelphia, but my opinions might change throughout the next few days. If you're watching this, make sure you do like and subscribe. It does help out a lot. And make sure you also go to Josh's channel, Josh's Sports Report. Subscribe to him as well. Check out some of his work. Recently had an interview with Rich Samini. Definitely want to check that one out. Do we have time for the weekly wrap?
Yeah, I think we do. I've got about 10 minutes before I got to hop off of this.
Yeah.
So I'll let you start us off here.
Yeah, all right. So I kind of want to stay on this Vikings game. Were the Vikings a fraudulent team throughout the entire season, or was this just a bad game at the wrong time?
I mean, extremely tough. I'm going to have to go and play option one out for you here. Fraudulent team throughout the entire game. They had about, yeah, I think you can agree with me. They had two big games this season,
Yeah.
Lions and Rams, and they lose
Yeah.
31-9 and 27-9. So that should tell you just about all you need to know. But then if you look back at their if you look back at their schedule beforehand, the Colts are keeping it close with them. They get swept by Detroit, just to put that out there. I mean, the best team in their division. They played in a great division. They keep it close with the Colts. They keep it close with the Bears. They keep it close with the Titans. They keep it extremely close with the Jaguars. Jaguars had a chance to win. They had a terrible, unnecessary roughness penalty at the end of that game. They keep it close with my Jets, which at the time didn't seem like as much as it was. But way back on when the Vikings were a 5-0 team and Sam Darnold was comeback player of the year. But yeah, I think that this Vikings team, outside of their own division, they had a relatively weak strength of schedule. Sam Darnold showed us a lot, and I think, I mean, there's some sense of stat padding here. When you have Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson, you can be more around a league average quarterback and still perform well. Maybe they weren't fraudulent all year, but what I'm 100%, 1,000% sure of is they crumbled under pressure. So they're not clutch. They can't perform when it matters. That sounds pretty fraudulent to me, Matt.
Yeah, now we do have a sideline whispers. Can you put Josh's links in the description? Absolutely. I'll put it in the description after we record this, but I also did put it in the chat right here if you want to go to his channel after this video and check it out. Josh, do you have anything for the weekly wrap now?
Yeah, I mean, I was also going to touch on this Vikings team, but I guess I'll have to hit us with a quick pivot here beforehand because I don't want to double down on that. This Texans team, I think we can say shocked the world. Thank you so much, Sideline Whisperers. Saw you in the chat there. Thanks for the sub. Everyone, make sure hit up Matt's channel. He's doing some great work, great interviews. I personally am covering New York sports, but back to this NFL topic. I mean, this Texans team basically shocked the world, 32-12. Who could have expected that? Many people thought that scoreboard was going to tilt the other way. Los Angeles would win 32-12. So can this Texans team, and especially thinking about that it is a Chiefs team that, I mean, if you want to say the Vikings have been fraudulent, the Chiefs have won so many one-score close games, pull it out in the end, just barely win. Can this Texans team hang with the Chiefs? What are you looking at next week when they go to Arrowhead to play the number one team in all of the NFL?
I don't see it. I really do not see it. Just because you mentioned that the Chiefs have obviously been on the good side of a lot of really close games. But the key when looking at those games is the fact that they won all of them. And some of those games came in against some tough competition. And you don't magically win 11 close games in a row. if it was 50-50, they wouldn't have won 11 in a row. I don't know what the odds of that are, but they're not too high. So there's clearly something, and do not say the refs, there's clearly something within Mahomes and his team that are actually, helping them win at the end. Because obviously, you're not going to go into all these situations, and you're not going to win all these games in these close situations unless you're actually a good team. And when it comes down to it, this was a good game for CJ Stroud, and I know I was talking good about him earlier this episode, but I don't think he has what it takes to beat Mahomes and the Chiefs, obviously. We'll see. That's hard to predict, but I think for me it was obviously a big surprise to see Houston even win this game, so I don't really know necessarily how that's going to work next year. I don't think this is the Texans' year. That's
Matt,
it. Well, I don't know when the Texans' year will be, but it's definitely not this year.
Matt, the way I see it, I mean,
Mhm.
Houston just played their best half of football all season
Yeah,
at the end of that
yeah,
Chargers game.
mhm,
That's the simplest way to put it. They go into the half up 10-6, and they win the game 32-12, right? Like,
right,
and look up and down their schedule. That's not adding up, especially the way they finished the year when they lose to the Ravens 31-2 on Christmas Day. Like what? Just 2 weeks ago,
mhm,
3 weeks
yeah,
ago, and then they barely escape against Tennessee. And the Titans made it close at the end there. So that math, I agree,
yeah,
isn't
and then
adding
I
up to a team
mhm,
that has a chance to three-peat. That's 2 wins away. Excuse me, 3 wins
mhm,
away from
mhm.
three-peating. First time in the history that would ever happen.
Yeah, and then I mentioned this, obviously, you just talked about that Ravens blowout. That's not a great look. I mentioned this during the, tailgate show. 9 of their 10 wins this season came against, teams below 500. That's not good. This team obviously cannot beat good competition. Yes, last week was an exception, but that's their peak. That's the best they're gonna play football, and now they obviously where do you go from, the top? You decline, and that's what I'm expecting to see in this next game. We do have time for probably one more question. What's up, guys? Do we think Washington has a shot versus Detroit? They have a shot. Um, I'm not gonna get into this too in depth right now, because we do have our tailgate show on Saturday, so make sure if you're watching this, you also tune into that one. They
Yep.
obviously have a shot, and I don't think that we're going to lose until I see a loss in the box score, because I wouldn't count out this Washington team with all the momentum they're playing with, obviously, and just I think overall, kinda just everything's flowing for them, right? They're building up a lot of team chemistry, and I'm not going to doubt their ability to win. I think that there's a shot that they could beat the Chiefs if they played the Chiefs. But it's still obviously going to be tough when it comes down to it. Jaden Daniels is an exception for a rookie quarterback, but he still is a rookie, and I don't know how he's going to perform against former number one overall pick veteran Jared Goff. And yeah, when you have Jaden Daniels, you have a shot. That's a really, really simple, well put way to, kind of summarize what I'm thinking heading into this game. Josh, do you have any opinions on this?
Yeah, Ryan, first of all, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to put Ryan's comment right back up there for a second here, Matt. Ryan is a super great guy that I got the pleasure to
Yeah.
meet at sports broadcasting camp. That's actually where Matt and I met as well. So this is unsponsored, but go check
Yeah.
them out.
Yeah.
They're just an
Yeah,
awesome
definitely do that.
network of awesome people. You got to love talking sports with sports broadcasting camp. Ryan, thanks so much for heading on to our show here. To answer your question, though, aside from the advertising plug, um, is I think they have a shot. And Timothy, way to put it well. When you have Jaden Daniels, you have a shot.
Mhm.
But really, to me, the Lions just have way too much talent. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Matt. I
Mhm.
mean, I hate to say it, and
No,
I
I
think
mean,
you know this. You know
yeah.
NFL
Yeah.
ball, so it's not ridiculous to come out here and say that there is a chance, and honestly, it might be a better chance than not that Washington loses by double digits, and that's not a knock to the Commanders of them playing bad, blah blah blah. They played well, but that Buccaneers team is not the same as this Lions team that they're going to go to Ford Field and play against.
Mhm.
Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jahmyr Gibbs. I think David Montgomery got cleared as well
Mhm.
off the injury report. You're going to have to double check me on that one. So, Matt, sorry, this isn't a knock to you or
Yeah.
anything, but
Mhm.
I just think Detroit has so much talent, man. How could they not beat
Mhm.
the lowly Commanders?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, there's a lot of things that I could critique about the Commanders' performance on Sunday, and those things might slide against the Buccaneers, they're not gonna slide against the Lions. Having bad cornerbacks, that's not gonna slide against the Lions. Having a struggling offensive line is not going to slide against the Lions, but with that being said, we are going to have to wrap things up. Josh, obviously, I really appreciate you coming on. Anything else you wanna say to the people watching before we wrap things up?
Guys, I think this was a pretty disappointing playoff round with all the blowouts. But guys, I think it's going to get so much better in this divisional round. Just to preview the matchups, we'll get into it more. Chiefs, Texans,
Mhm.
Lions, Commanders,
Yeah.
Eagles, Rams, and then might I have saved the best for last? We didn't even get into this one yet today. Ravens, Bills. This should be an awesome divisional round weekend wherever you are. I'll be up in the Northeast in Vermont actually, but I'm gonna be more than ready to get watching on what should be a great divisional round. So expect more close games. Expect teams fighting for their lives, doing whatever they can to try and get into that conference championship round. We're in the final four of both the AFC and NFC. All 8 of these teams are 3 wins away from hoisting the Lombardi Trophy. Matt, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks everyone for listening in the chat, and we'll see you all on the tailgate episode. Matt, close us out.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, real quick, I know you got to get going, but before we close out, I do want to thank everyone in the chat. This was the most active we've had the chat for any live stream. Great show, guys. Really appreciate that, Timothy, and everyone else who was supporting us in the chat today. But for everyone who made it up to this point, can't thank you enough for watching. Again, I'm Matthew Heiserman alongside Josh Wolfer for your wild card round Highlight Haven NFL recap show. And as always, we will see you next time.